Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, Nobel Peace Prize laureate and Member of Parliament for Burma, ministers, excellencies, trustees, friends of SMU, students, and others. Welcome to the sixth lecture in the Ho Rui Hua series. Because of the shortage of time, and we know the great many number of questions people have, I'm actually going to dispense with a very detailed CV of Daw Suu. If you want to know more, her life has actually been an open book. You can read her books, or better yet, you can watch the movie. I just wanted to make a little personal remark here. You did not see the movie, madam. I just wanted to make a personal remark here, and that is that the person for whom the lecture series is named, Mr. Ho Rui Hua, was my father. And although we've had 6 speakers so far from heads of state and heads of government, I believe that if he were today here with us, he would have been especially pleased. Because he started his working life in Burma in 1947. And my elder sister was born just 5 years after you yourself were born. My parents met and married, and they started their working lives in Rangoon, which was at that time the most sophisticated city in all of Southeast Asia. They left a few years, many years later, out of duress, and certainly not of their own volition, to Thailand and then finally to Singapore. As you know only too well, Daw Suu, the history of Burma has not been a happy one. And they left when the dark clouds of oppression began to overcome the country. I think he would have been particularly happy today, both he and my mother, that today we are beginning to see the dark clouds that have been over Burma for so many years beginning to lift under your hopeful leadership. So all I can say also, I think, is that for all of us who've been here who have witnessed the other series we've had very eminent people, from President Aquino, the Philippines, from ex-Prime Minister Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, Mr. Mahathir, Mohammed, and so on. But truly, we do believe that you are a class of your own. And in the history of the modern world, probably there are only a few other people, from Mahatma Gandhi to Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, and now yourself, who has, through your own life, set an example of how peaceful, non-violent change can truly change the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Daw Aung San Suu Kyi.
As the film was mentioned in the introduction, let me say that I didn't see the film, and so if any of your ideas of leadership came from the film, they have nothing to do with me. And the reason why I didn't see the film was very simple. I would have been embarrassed to see it, because other people's interpretations of one's life is never quite the same as how you see it yourself. And I've been asked very often to speak about leadership because people are interested in leadership. But I wonder whether we shouldn't be more interested in followership, so to speak. I've always said that nobody who is a bad follower would ever make a good leader, because basically you have to learn to value those people whom you're trying to lead in some way or the other, whether it's in economics or whether it's in the social sphere or in the political sphere. Now, your university is one about management. Management is a form of leadership. Management is what the expression that is now acceptable, for example, in the sense of crowd management. They do not talk about crowd control anymore. That's not politically correct. So management is a way of saying leadership or control, but also a way of making you understand that you have to be able to reach out to the people whom you're trying to lead somewhere, or whom you're trying to manage, if you prefer that word. There are, of course, different kinds of leadership. And I think most of you probably think that I would be speaking about political leadership, and that is true, because that's what I'm most familiar with. One doesn't really start out to be a leader. At least I didn't start out to be a leader. I started out to be part of a movement because I believed in that movement. I believed in what that movement trying to achieve. So for me, leadership must begin with commitment, with conviction. When you start out somewhere, you've got to be determined to get to the end of the road. I think that's one of the most difficult things about the kind of movement in which our country has been involved. As you're all aware, our uprising for democracy was in 1988. Now that's 25 years ago. It's a long time. I think some of the students here probably were not born in 1988. And it's a long time in which to pursue a path that was not particularly easy. Now, I have to say here that I was much more fortunate than many of my colleagues because I want to pay them that tribute. People concentrate on me because I'm the one who is very visible. But I couldn't have arrived where I am now today without the support of my colleagues, of my friends, without the support of our people. And it was much more difficult for other people than it was for me. I always had the protection of my father's name. I admit this very readily and with gratitude, that the memory of my father gave me tremendous protection over all these last years. My father was the founder of the modern Burmese army, and because of that, the military regime who placed me under house arrest for many years always treated me well. On a personal basis. Of course, it attacked me terribly publicly, but I never read the newspapers anyway, so it didn't affect me too much. But whenever they met me personally, they treated me well, they treated me with respect, and I think in some cases I could even say with warmth and affection, because they could never forget that I was my father's daughter. So when I speak about leadership, I'm thinking more about my father than about me, because I think the final assessment on me has yet to be done. Now, my father died in 1947. That was the year you said your father went to Burma. He died in 1947, but decades after he was no longer there, I was still protected by his name, by his memory, and our people were still inspired by his memory. The reason why they accepted me was because they believed that as the daughter of my father, I would not fail them, as he never failed them in their time of need. This, I think, in the end, is what leadership is about. You should be able to fulfill the need of the people that the people who are willing to be led by you. They're willing to be led by you because you fulfill their need for hope, their need to believe in themselves. If you cannot make those people you're trying to lead believe in themselves, you cannot really be a leader. So to make people believe in themselves, you've got to respect them. You've got to truly value them. I don't want to use the word love, partly because patriotism in Burmese translates as love of your race, love of your people. And I have to say that during the years of dictatorship, the regime claimed patriotism as their own. And so I'm very wary of using the word patriotism. I believe that all people love their own country in their own way. Not always in the same way, but in their own way. And everybody has a right to claim that they are as patriotic as everybody else. And this is very interesting because in one of the speeches my father gave to the fledgling Burmese army in the early 1940s, I think probably around 1943, he said then, "Don't think that it's only you soldiers who love your country. There are ordinary citizens who love your country just as much and who have sacrificed just as much as you have done." And it surprised me because this was at the very beginning. Of course, my father was very young then. He started out as the commander-in-chief of the Burma Independence Army at 26. So when he gave that speech, he was perhaps 27, 28. he was already aware of the danger of the military thinking that they were better than ordinary citizens. Because my father was not a soldier who became a politician, but a politician who became a soldier for the purpose of achieving independence for our country. There's a great difference there. I do not think that soldiers should turn politicians, and my father believed in that. So when it was time for him to go into politics, this was after the war in 1945, which is the year I was born, so it was a good year. The war came to an end, and my father had to make the decision whether or not to remain in the army. There is a letter that he wrote to Lord Mountbatten at that time, explaining that he was going to choose to go back into civilian life because he felt that his calling was mainly a political one. And if he were going to do politics, he would do so as a civilian, not as a soldier. The army should be left to professional soldiers. And he recommended, as the commander-in-chief of the Burmese army, as it was going to be then, a man who was an ethnic Karen and who was a professional soldier trained by the British Army, because my father believed in professionalism. And I think all of you who are studying at this university will know how important professionalism is in all spheres. And you have to believe in professionalism if you believe that people can work together. And again, that is what leadership is about, making people work together, making it possible for people to work together. I talked to some Burmese students this morning who have been studying here for some time, and I asked them what they found admirable about the system here. And one of the things they mentioned, which I liked very much, was the fact that there was teamwork. They were taught how to work as a team in the higher institutes of higher education here, and not when they were in Burma. And that is very true. I have found that our young people these days are poor in teamwork because our educational system has been such that they are not taught about teamwork. For example, sports are barely played in our schools. We do not have adequate, to use a mild word, sports facilities. So there is no teamwork. Sports is very good when it comes to promoting teamwork. And then we do not do educational projects, the kind of projects that you do together as a team. So teamwork is not something that is taught in our country. And because we don't have an educational system that promotes teamwork, leadership becomes more of a difficulty, more of a responsibility. Because what we are talking about are leaders, not commanders. There's a difference. Leaders lead, commanders command, and they expect the commands to be obeyed, whether or not they are reasonable. Now, leadership means convincing those whom you aspire to lead that the way you have chosen is the right one. It has to be a choice. They have to choose to follow you. That is what leadership is about. With a commander, there is no choice. You either follow or else. And I don't think we want that follow or else attitude in a democracy. So what we are working towards is the right kind of leadership in a new system. For half a century, our country lived under an authoritarian government. And for half a century, the minds of those who govern us were set in a certain way. Then that was the way of military dictatorship. So what we want now is not a military dictatorship mindset, but a democratic mindset that values the people, that understands that whatever we achieve, we have to achieve with the willing support of the people. And that if we think that we should go a certain way, then we have to try to convince our public to go with us. You can't drag them along the way unwillingly. That's not what leadership mindset for democracy is like. A revolutionary leader is often different from the kind of leader you need in times of reconstruction. These were the two words that we used immediately after independence to a certain degree. Revolutionary leadership and a reconstruction leadership, because that was a time when we needed to reconstruct our country. Now we are once again in that kind of time. We call this now a time of transition, although I think we have to question how far along the way this transition process is, or whether it's genuine enough, whether it's stable enough, whether it's strong enough. But we now want to think in terms of reconstructing our country, of remaking our society in a democratic mode. And that is very difficult after decades of authoritarian government, because it's not just those governed who change, it's those who are governed who change as well. So the mindset of those who are governing a country is affected and should be affected by the public at large. So we all have a responsibility. I do not believe that if you say achieving democracy is the responsibility of a particular party or a particular leader or a few leaders, I don't think this is democracy. If we want democracy, we have to be determined that we are going to be part of the process. And anybody who aspires to be a leader in a democracy must also understand that he or she is part of a process. And it is not he or she who is going to determine what the destiny of a nation is going to be. But of course, there has to be vision. Leadership entails vision. Otherwise, where are you leading people to? If you don't know where you want to go to, you have no right to ask people to go along with you. So that is what vision is, knowing where it is that you want to go to, and to be able to explain this to those whom you aspire to lead, why you want to go where you want to get to, why you want to go where you want to get to in a particular way. It's not just getting to a goal, but how you get to a goal that is decisive, that is important. And you have to decide, are you going to take more time to make sure that the way is smoother? Or do you want to put an emphasis on speed, on speedy achievement? And why? You have to balance. In the end, as I said this morning, speaking to our young people and speaking to the Burmese community, democracy is a matter of choice. You should give the people a choice. And leaders have to try hard to make sure that the choices made by the public are the ones that they think are best for the country. So it's a matter not just of your own conviction, but also of convincing others. And if your reasoning is not solid enough, if it is not acceptable, in the long run, people will not follow you. That is why we have elections in democracies, so that people can decide that they do not want to go on following a particular party or a particular leader or a particular way. That is what people should be allowed to do in a democracy, in a democratic society. Our people have not had this opportunity, have not been able to exercise this right to freedom of choice to the full as yet. I think I can claim that the by-elections we had last year were free, not entirely fair, because by free elections, I mean that the people were free to cast their votes as they wish on the polling day. But by fair, I mean the run-up to the whole process. Was the whole run-up to the by-elections fair? I would say that it was not entirely fair. And we are still trying to achieve the kind of society where we can have not just free elections, but fair elections. Now, I'm not going to go into what I mean by fair now, because then this will be a diversion. So let me just keep to my topic for the day, which is just mindset and leadership. And I think I have 5 minutes left. Yes. So in this 5 minutes, I would like to read you an extract from a poem of which I'm very fond, and which is by Tennyson. Now, don't turn up your noses because it's Tennyson. There was one time when I thought Tennyson was not a very good or inspiring poet. But as I grew older and read more of his poetry, I found a lot of very, very good stuff there. And this is one called Ulysses. And this is supposed to have been written by Ulysses towards the end of his life. And he talks about his son. I'm sure I don't have to explain to the students of FMU who Ulysses was, and that he came back from his wanderings around the world after many years. And in this poem he says, "This is my son, mine own Telemachus, to whom I leave the scepter and the isle. Well loved of me, discerning to fulfill this labor, by slow prudence to make mild a rugged people, and through soft degrees subdue them to the useful and the good." So that is the kind of leadership we would like in a peaceful, progressive, democratic society. Ulysses himself was somewhat of a swashbuckler and rather dishonest, in my opinion. I was never terribly fond of him until I read this poem. Then I saw him in a new light. Of course, that was not Ulysses. I mean, this was Tennyson. But still, the idea of a leader who was a steward. Stewardship is the kind of leadership we should aspire to in a democracy. Not commanders, but stewards who know that they have been given the responsibility for a particular society, for a particular people, for a particular nation, for a set period of time. Not forever is there's the power. It's not power. It's responsibility. It's stewardship to guide these people, the society, the nation, during the time that you have been given in the best possible way, in the most civilized way possible, in the broad sense of the word civilization, to make that society more civilized, more human, to retain the values that are best for human society. I was asked this morning why I didn't talk more about economics. Quite frankly, I thought I heard enough about it at the Singapore summit. And so I thought I will concentrate on other things. Everywhere I go nowadays, people talk about economics all the time. And this is important, of course, because we are physical beings and we need to be physically well off. So our material situation is very important. But I would like to say also that we have to think of our spiritual situation. Now, of course, people talk about EQ, emotional quotient, as well as IQ. But I think we also have to think about the spiritual SQ, which is not quite the same as the emotional. I think the spiritual is reaching out to somewhere higher than you've been. And I think this is what leadership is about, reaching out to somewhere higher where we've always been, but reaching out together and reaching out as a responsibility, as a steward, and not as somebody who will decide what the destiny of people who follow them are going to be. We all decide our destiny together. We decide as a nation, as a society, where we wish to go to. But sometimes, because there are so many of us, we can't come to a single decision. And then it is up to those who aspire to be leaders to unite all the diversity that exists in any healthy society, normal society, into a unity of purpose that will get us to a place that is better and higher than we have been before. So I think that simply, to me, is the mindset of leadership, the determination to serve, not to lead. And it's the determination and the commitment to serve that decides who is a real leader, not the desire to be a leader itself. Thank you.